Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and you are watching a new episode on the Wojennik TV YouTube channel. Polish soldiers fought on different fronts of World War II. But no matter if this fight was on the ground, on the sea or in the air, they always fought for something bigger. This was free Poland. They fought bravely on different fronts and in different times of World War II from the beginning up to its end. One of the major Polish contributions to the fight on the Western Front was without any doubt the Battle of Britain. During this battle, Polish pilots flying on British aircraft fought bravely against German invaders. The most efficient squadron in all the Royal Air Force during this period was Squadron 303, and this squadron was composed mainly of Polish pilots. Today I would like to show you a game which will be shortly published thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign, as we all hope, which is called 303 Squadron. This is a game which will be published by the Polish company hobbity.eu. It is designed by Michał Kochman and it is meant to be played by 1 to 4 players. It is a cooperative game in which we will take the role of one of those pilots flying on Hurricanes in 303 Squadron. Our main objective will be to defend Britain against German invaders flying on aircraft such as the Messerschmitts or the Heinkels. The game is meant to be played by players from 14 years old up, but it's surely also absolutely possible to be played by younger children because, as I said earlier, it's a cooperative game. Earlier you could already see an interview with the designer Michał Kochman, who explained what was the reason why he decided to design such a game, what were the milestones during the creation of this game and what are his objectives. The campaign which will launch this game on Kickstarter starts in the beginning of December, so in a few days. Today I would like to show you how a prototype of this game looks like, what are its basic mechanisms, and at the end I would like to give you my final thoughts about the strengths and also possibly about some weaknesses of this title, so that you could decide if to back this project on Kickstarter. So let's begin this journey. First of all, let's take a look at the components. Here are the elements which will be enclosed in the box of 303 Squadron. As I mentioned earlier, this is a prototype version, so some of those elements will look different in the final game. Some of them are totally absent from this piece of prototype and they will be added to the final version. So let's just take a brief look at what to expect. Now, the first element which we will receive in this game is the game map. As you can see, it's a big gaming map representing a part of southern England alongside with London, the channel through which German planes will be crossing the bridge between the continent and the British Isles, because the continent is on the bottom right of the gaming map. As you can see, the map is being divided into zones, into sectors. Each of those zones, each of those sectors has its own description. We have a letter, we have a number, we have some borders between those sectors, between those zones, in order to see exactly how the planes can move. When we speak of planes, we will receive 4 types of planes in this game. One of them will be the Hurricane, which will be used by the players. Each player will have their own individual plane, aircraft, which we will be using during the game in order to shoot down or to just block the passage of German aircraft. The opposing German aircraft will be of 3 types. The first one will be the Heinkel bomber, which will be the major threat during the game because most scenarios will will consist of German bombing some targets, and if they manage to achieve such a goal, players lose. So it is absolutely crucial to stop those big Heinkels. The second type of German aircraft used in the game will be the much smaller Messerschmitt 109, the Bf 109. So this will be a fast aircraft, a fighter which will try to defend the Heinkels and at the same time to shoot down our Hurricanes. The second German fighter bomber will be the Bf 110, bigger than the Bf 109 but slower. It will also appear in some scenarios, and it will at most times have its own mission in finding and shooting down the players. As you can see, all those planes will be on supports, so they will be quite nicely looking on the map. And of course, those miniatures can be painted if you like painting miniatures, so those miniatures will be suitable for such an activity. All of those planes will be used in order to maneuver on the game map, in order to accomplish the objectives of each side. During battle, during combat, we will be using dice, and we have a lot of dice in 303 Squadron. We have white dice, red dice, black, blue, and a single yellow die. In general, the white, red, and black dice will be used by the Germans, whereas the blue ones will be used by players, and so will be the sole yellow die. Each of the German aircraft has its own card showing you the parameters, the statistics of such a plane. We have the information about its toughness, about its speed, and the type of combat dice used during counterattacks, during dogfights. And those types of dice will be taken from a pool in order to determine the combat outcome. The players will be using the blue dice during gameplay. Each player will receive a set of cubes in their own color, which will be used during gameplay to indicate the damage inflicted to opposing aircraft. Each player will also randomly receive a pilot card. We have several of them in this game. Each of them is a historical figure, a historical pilot who piloted a Hurricane in the 303 Squadron. So for instance, we can become Witold Urbanowicz, or we can become pilot Jan Zumbach. Each of those pilots has his own unique ability, which will influence gameplay, which will be used to increase the stats, the efficiency of such a pilot, or to help his squadron teammates. Each player will receive their own small aircraft board, on which we will be placing our pilot card, on which we will be also tracking damage, because each player will receive a set of white counters which will cover at the game's beginning each of those spaces located at the bottom side of this small board. But each time a pilot, a plane receives damage, we will be uncovering such spaces, and uncovering some of them will have negative impact on the efficiency of such a plane. We have also two trackers. The first one will be used to track ammo. The second one, which as you can see is not being installed yet, will be used, as I suppose, to track experience, because it will also be possible to acquire experience, especially while playing the campaign mode. We receive a second board, a bigger one, which will be used to store cards, because in 303 Squadron we will receive several types of cards, and one of those will be the mission cards. Those cards will inform us how to set up a scenario, so what will be the starting position of the players, what will be the goal of the German aircrafts, what will be their starting location, if we will draw any random events during gameplay, how many cards we should draw at the game start when setting up the game, and how long this game will last. The time will be tracked on this board because we receive also a counter which will be used to track the number of rounds played. Now, when we speak of cards, we receive also additional types of cards. We receive, as I said earlier, an additional deck of small cards used during setup. We will be drawing those cards in order to indicate the type and number of German planes placed at the game's start. We receive also standard sized cards. One of them little bigger ones will be used as random events. We will be drawing such events during gameplay if a scenario tells us to do so. And the second type, the standard sized cards, will be the player's cards, because each turn we will be using such cards for different reasons. Those cards will be used in order to increase the number of spaces which a plane can move during each turn. We will be using cards to support our teammates in combat using this central section of a card. We will be using cards to defend against enemy damage. We will be using this section right here in order to do so. And lastly, we will be using those cards during combat to obtain some beneficial effects. So we can obtain maneuver symbols or defense symbols, or maybe attack symbols in order to shoot down enemy planes. Additionally, each card will have a certain capability, a certain capacity, which can be activated if we happen to obtain a different set of dice results. We also receive a set of counters which will be used for different things. As I said earlier, some of them will be used to track damage on our own aircraft. We will receive also maneuver counters which will be used both to block enemy planes and also to obtain some benefits for our own aircrafts. And we will receive also different colored counters, for instance, to track the destination some enemy aircraft will be taking during gameplay. If we happen to have many opposing planes on the board, those counters will help us to show exactly the path which a formation had planned to take. Now, I won't be showing two additional components which will be very important elements of the final 303 Squadron game. The first one is the rulebook, because I don't have any to show you at the current moment. The second one, which is also, I think, worth to be mentioned, will be the scenario, not the scenario book. It will be the compendium, so it will be something of an additional booklet, a historical booklet, in which you will be able to find additional information about the 303 Squadron. So, for instance, about the pilots, about the events described in the game, about the scenarios, in general, about the history of this interesting formation. So that will be a nice addition, and I believe it's one of the factors which will increase the educational aspect of this game. Now, those are pretty much all the components used in 303 Squadron. I would like now to show you how a turn looks like, what are the basic mechanisms of this game. 303 Squadron is played in a series of rounds. The number of rounds depends on the scenario. The objective of the players will be to accomplish the objectives of such a scenario. In most times it will be to stop the German player from accomplishing his own objectives. The German AI will be constructed in such a way that the planes, which will be the German bombers and fighters, will be moving alongside a certain path towards their objective, and they will try to bomb this objective. The players lose the game if the German bombers achieve their objective and manage to bomb it. A second way to lose is to lose all our pilots in our squadron, because when setting up the game, we not only choose or randomly choose one pilot for each player, we also create a stack of additional pilots. Each time one of our airplanes is being shot down, we can draw a new pilot from this stack. If the stack is empty, we lose the game. So it is absolutely possible to be shut down, but to continue playing with a new pilot, with a new aircraft. So how a turn of 303 Squadron looks like. At the beginning of each turn, we verify if there is an event, because in some scenarios there can be an event at the start of a turn. If there is none, we pass on to the player's turn. During this phase, we first of all draw additional cards from the draw deck. The maximum number of cards that each player can have is 2 plus the current number of ammunition units left on our airplane. So for instance, if we have 4 ammo units, we can have at most times 6 cards, not more. At the beginning of each turn, we can draw 2 cards from the draw deck. So if you play a lot of cards during the turn, you will be able only to have 2 additional cards during our next turn. So you have to always carefully think about how to use your cards and how to manage the resources, because if you spend too many, you will be left with really few cards during future turns. When drawing cards, you will then select those cards during the next phases of the game, and those cards will be used in different ways, which are already explained while showing you those cards. The first moment when those cards will be useful will be the movement phase, because during the movement phase, each player can move his fighter. We can first of all move a fighter one space freely at free without spending any resources. It's a free move. But be careful, because if your fighter is damaged, it can happen that you cannot move your fighter without a cost. If you uncover the symbol of the free move, you cannot move one space without spending a card. You will have to pay. How do we pay? Well, we choose a card and we can move our fighter a number of spaces equal to the number of symbols indicated on the upper left corner of the card. If we choose, for instance, this card, we can move our fighter one space. If we choose this one, we can move up to 3 spaces. This move is in addition to our free move, so if our fighter is not damaged, if we can move freely, we can not only move 1 space, but additionally 1, 2, or even 3 spaces more. So we can move entering a sector in which opposing aircraft are located. And entering in such a sector will trigger combat, because we can decide to attack those planes. Attacks are resolved in such a way that each plane can target one plane of his choice. We can choose a fighter, we can also choose a bomber. And while doing so, the first thing will be to determine the number and type of dice used during combat. Our fighters will always use 2 blue dice, unless the player decides to sacrifice his pilot's special capability and obtain the special yellow die. The special yellow die is, as you can see, a 6-sided die on which we have the correct symbol on 5 sides, and on one side we have this 2 in an explosion. This explosion means that our fighter immediately suffers 2 damage. All the other symbols, so 5 from 6, means a success. So you can choose freely the symbol which you want to receive while rolling such a result. So this is a very powerful die, but it is also a dangerous die, because if you happen to roll this 2, well, you suffer 2 damage immediately. the bombers and the fighters will use a quantity and a type of dice indicated on those cards. So you can use, for instance, red dice or black dice in different combinations. For instance, the bombers, the Heinkels, will use 2 black dice on their own, but additionally 1 black die for each pair of Heinkels on a space. So while attacking such bombers, if they are more numerous than 1, it is much more difficult to shot them down. So, for instance, attacking such a Heinkel here would require us to roll 3 dice, 2 for the Heinkel himself and 1 for the pair in this sector. After determining the number of and type of dice, we roll all of them, and we verify the results. The black dice, as you can see, have a hit symbol, have also an empty symbol, which means just nothing, and a reroll symbol. And while rolling those dice, we will check the results. After checking those results, we can play a card from our hand. Each combat will always be played in a series of 2 combat rounds, and during each round we will have the opportunity to play one of our cards. What card to choose? Well, we should always look at the symbol which such a card grants us, and those symbols can be of different types. We can have the maneuver symbol, which will enable us to receive a maneuver token, which can be used both for ourselves. We can store such a counter on our aircraft in order, for instance, to escape combat during a future movement. But we can also apply such a counter to the bomber, blocking it in this space for 1 complete turn. Such a bomber cannot move closer to its objective while it has such a token. The only thing that such a bomber will do will just be removing this token from itself. The second symbol is a hit, so we can inflict a hit onto the opposing aircraft. We have also the defense symbol, which will stop a hit inflicted by our opponent. Additionally, those cards have a special capability. If we manage to obtain a set, for instance here a set of defense and of a maneuver, we can gain an additional symbol. So here, for instance, if we happen to roll, for instance, such a symbol, if we also have a maneuver symbol additionally, we will receive 1 more defense. Overs can grant us additional hits or additional maneuver tokens. So it always depends on what our opponent rolled and what we want to obtain during such a combat round. We can play a card, and then also here, as you can see, for each set we will gain a symbol, and we can apply 1 of the 2 dice rolled in order to activate such a special capability, or just to activate the result of such a die. Additionally, while playing such a card, we can receive support from one of our teammates. Each one of our players can use their own set of cards in their hand in order to support us during this dogfight. While doing so, we will verify the center part of a card, and those are the symbols which the other player can add to the symbol on our own card. If we have here a defense symbol, we can obtain an additional defense symbol in case we receive 3 of a kind. So we would need 2 more defense symbols. This card would apply because we have an additional defense symbol and a joker which can replace any symbol. So using such a card will create a 3 of a kind. So we will receive 1 additional defense factor, which will help us to stop one of those hits. After applying any potential hits, both on the defender and the attacker, we have the opportunity to continue the fight for another round using the second die and placing a new card. All the symbols which were activated during the first play are still active, with the exception of the capability of the first card, which will not be active during the second round. But we can also choose to target another plane on the same sector. If we choose to do so, we play this card separately, and all the previous results are not taken into consideration during the second combat. We will fight a new plane, we will roll new dice for this opponent, and we can only use this card and the second die which we rolled previously, so no other results. After resolving such combat, during which we also can receive support from one of our friends, we inflict all the damage, we place damage tokens on damaged aircraft which were not shot down, we apply maneuver tokens, and we pass on to another combat made by another player. After resolving each combat, each German fighter which has not been attacked counterattacks, which means that we choose an amount of dice equal to the number of fighters present on such a space which can't counterattack. For instance, one Messerschmitt will roll 2 die, 2 Messerschmitts will roll 4 die, etc. We roll those die and we roll those dice and we verify the results. Here, as you can see, the results would mean 2 hits. At the same time, those hits have a certain symbol on them. This symbol means that in order to defend against such a hit, we have to play a card from our hand which has this symbol. So if we are attacked by a hit with a 4, we have to play a card which has such a symbol. Here, as you can see, this symbol is absent. We can defend against a 2 and against a 3, not against a 4. But if we look further, we can find such a card which will defend us against such a hit. If we do play it, we will defend 1 hit with this symbol. So that's a way to reduce the number of damage sustained. After the counterattacks are done, we pass on to the movement phase of the Germans. Each bomber, each aircraft which doesn't have this maneuver symbol on it will move 1 space closer to the target. And after doing so, we just end the turn and we replay a new one, replenishing our hand by drawing 2 cards and then deciding what to do. And those are pretty much the basic mechanisms of 303 Squadron. There are additional rules governing campaign mode, regarding medals, regarding ammunition, but I won't be explaining them right now. I would like to tell you what are my opinions about this game and what I think are its strong and a little weaker points, and if I believe it's a project worth supporting on Kickstarter. At the beginning of this video, I have already said that 303 Squadron was the most efficient squadron in all the Royal Air Force during the Battle of Britain. So this is a thing from which Poles in general are very proud of. And this is also a fact, a thing that is well known both in Poland and in Britain. But as all facts, those things risk to disappear if we do not speak about them loudly. And one of such tools which can be used to preserve such elements of our history are board games. So I think it's a great idea to prepare a board game covering this important subject. From this point of view, I think the game has also an educational value which always deserves to be mentioned. Having said that, I would also like to judge this game by its mechanisms. So I would like to give you my opinion about how this game works and if from this mechanical point of view it's a product which deserves to be backed on Kickstarter. So I have already said a few words about the topic. I will now pass on to the mechanisms. What I believe is a great strength of this game is the fact that we receive a game which has really easy mechanisms. So those mechanisms are not very complicated to learn. They are not very complicated to teach. Something quite strange when it comes to war games. But is 303 really a war game? Now, I would say yes and no, because it's a game which is something of a mix of those two categories, of a war game and of a Euro game. It is, of course, a game covering a historical event. It's a game using aircraft. It's a game in which we will shoot down some aircraft, in which we will have dogfights. At the same time, we will be managing resources. We will be tossing dice. This is a mix which takes the best from one gaming family and from the other, and it glues them in such a way that those mechanisms and the topic work well together. So this is a game which will be something which can interest both wargamers and Eurogamers. A great idea and a great potential, because it's not just for wargamers, it's not just for Eurogamers, it's for everyone. 303 Squadron works well thanks to its mechanisms, which are based on card management. This is the most important aspect of the game. We receive a deck of cards on which we will be using during multiple stages of the turn, and which can be used in few different ways. We can use them to move our aircraft. We can use them in combat, but in the purpose of evading, making evasive maneuvers. We can use them to shoot down enemy planes. We can use them to support our squadron members. So sometimes we will really carefully have to plan our turn. We will have to carefully look at the cards that we have in hand in order to search for the best solution, for the best combination, not only of our own cards, but also looking for some combinations and synergies with cards which our teammates have. So this is a game very easy to understand, very easy to teach, but at the same time requiring us to make some agonizing decisions from time to time. This is also a very dynamic game, a game in which even if you think that you're totally doomed because you had bad dice rolls, because you have weaker cards, you always can do something with those assets. You can always find a solution, and this is what I really love in this game, because there is no point of no return. You always can find a solution even in the most dangerous situation. Of course, sometimes you will be shot down, you will lose your pilot. But guess what? You do not lose the game. You can grab a new pilot and you can continue playing. This is also a nice part of the game because it enables to stay in the game even if one of our planes is shot down. Of course, if we lose too many pilots, we will lose the game because we cannot receive those pilots without any limits. But the first or second time we are shot down, we can still recover and we can still be part of the team. What I really like is the fact that the game uses some smart mechanisms consisting of matching the cards with the dice. We have, as I said, different options of using our cards, and each time we roll the dice, we can look at the combinations which can be obtained thanks to those cards and die rolls. So we really have to carefully think about it, and we always have to take into consideration if we are able to stop the bombers or if we are able to sustain the damage that counterattacking fighters can do us. What I really like is the fact also that we receive not only the full cooperative mode but also the solo mode, during which one player can play the British and he can try to stop the German advance. We also receive the campaign mode, which in my opinion is a fantastic addition to the game, because aviation games are games with a huge narrative potential. Those are games which are just begging for this additional background story, which are games when we live our own story, where we can tell all this story, where we can feel for the pilots which we are playing. So this is a nice addition, because thanks to this additional mode, we can gain experience, we can see the development of our pilot, and maybe also we can then see how this pilot achieves additional victories during additional dogfights. What I really like is also the fact that this is a game that, as I said earlier, which will suit not only wargamers. It's a game with a very nice time of play, because we can play a game in 45 minutes up to 1 hour. It's at the same time, it's also a game which uses some mechanisms which will suit wargamers. So this is a game which will suit many people. So what are the weaker points of this title, if there are any? I would say that I had some problems with the map's visibility, because in my opinion the game map, the borders on the map should be a little more clearer. Now I had sometimes some doubts where are the optional routes for German bombers and fighters. I had to carefully study the map in order to see which route they should take. Those sector borders should be, in my opinion, a little bit more clear. I also believe that the game would receive an additional boost, having some not only cooperative rules but also some competitive rules, because at the present time we receive a product in which it is a full cooperation, and I know of many wargamers, of many players who like competitive play and who do not like strictly cooperative games. So adding this competitive mode would be an answer to their doubts. It would be a clear way to give them a possibility to treat this game not only in the cooperative way, but also playing competitively. I also believe that the game would benefit from additional scenarios, because we receive quite a few of them in the base game. We receive the campaign mode, and what deserves to be underlined is the fact that those scenarios in the game are really different one from another. But at the same time, I believe the game would receive an additional boost, having some additional scenarios. Maybe this is an idea for an additional level on the Kickstarter campaign. Maybe this is something that should be unlocked if the game really does well on Kickstarter. Just an idea, and I think that in my opinion, would additionally augment the value of this product. Having said all that, I believe that 303 Squadron is a very well laid game. It's a game with a fantastic theme. It's a game with a great narrative. It's a game with interesting mechanisms, requiring us to cooperate very intensely. A game in which we will have to carefully plan our turn, in which we will have to carefully use our assets. A game which will suit not only wargamers but also Eurogamers. You should definitely back this game on Kickstarter, because it's just a very interesting product. Thank you a lot for watching this video. This was a review of the prototype of 303 Squadron from hobbity.eu. I invite you to look at our other materials. We have some reviews, some unboxings. Have a fantastic day and see you next time.